Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to USA Global TV and Radio. Our show today is The Corner Bookstore, and I'm your host, DIANN FLOYD BOEHM. Dr. Jacalyn, founder and president of the USA Global TV and Radio, is producing the show today, so she won't be joining us, but she is backstage working her magic, and I'm so grateful for her. She's an amazing woman. It is going to be a fabulous show, as I am excited about our guest. He is author Kev Harrison. He is a writer of dark fiction, and he hails from England, but is a world traveler and living in Portugal. He's also an English language educator. So let's bring out our guest.
Hi there, Diane. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
On the show.
Absolutely. We are so happy to have you here, and I'm excited to talk about dark fiction. And so I want to learn lots about you and your travels, but I really want to just jump right into it and have you tell our guest exactly what dark fiction is and why you enjoy writing in that genre.
Well, yeah, it's a really great question to start off with, actually. I started off writing what I suppose we'd call horror, really. But as I've developed in my writing career over the last sort of six years or so, I found that what I write tends to veer sometimes away from what you might think of as traditional horror, you know, like the blood and the guts and the gore and that kind of thing. But at the same time, I'm very interested in keeping these dark moods, you know, like writing pieces that are unsettling, that induce dread in the reader. And so I think dark fiction is maybe a better catch-all for what I do, rather than sort of like pigeonholing myself into horror. So yeah, that's where it comes from.
So is it fair to say when someone talks about dark fiction, they could add the sound?
I definitely think that's fair. Yeah, absolutely. definitely going for creepy. That is very much my cup of tea.
That's coming. And do you go to places to help get you going and set the mood? Or are you just so happy-go-lucky you can just switch and go into dark horror?
I mean, yeah, I actually find like that if I try and write something that isn't dark, my imagination kind of turns me through the door into the dark stuff anyway. So I think this is just a natural disposition I have. But I mean, in terms of, funny you ask about going to places to get inspiration, actually. I've been very lucky that over the last couple of years, I've managed to visit a few places specifically for research for some of the books I've been working on. And that's been an incredible experience to sort of get into a place and, you know, sort of see, smell, hear, breathe the air in those places where I'm going to be writing. So yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It helps get the elements that you want in your story, doesn't it, to make it very honest and truthful. Absolutely. And since I spoke of elements, as an author, do you make sure that you have like a certain list of all your elements that you follow, guidelines, or are you what they call the pantster and you just write?
Well, I started off very much pantsing when I began writing. Like the first novella I wrote, which is called The Balance, I pantsed pretty much the whole thing until I found kind of a roadblock sort of towards the end, and then had to unpick some of the stuff I'd done already. But as I've gone along, I found that it's helped me quite a bit to start to plan a little bit. So now I'm kind of a hybrid between a planner and a pantser, really. And so what I tend to do now is I will create some milestones, which I want to hit throughout my process in the book or in the story or what have you. And then the way that I get from point A to point B to point C is kind of a bit more seat of my pants. But what about you? What's your approach?
Oh, that's so sweet of you to ask. I'm definitely, if I'm writing children's books, a pantster, but I did discover that I'm really a hybrid, and I really think all authors are, because if you just sit and write and then you have the story, then you still have to mold it and edit it and move things around, right?
Absolutely. Yeah,
so then you end up with an
is.
outline, right? And then, but when I'm writing a novel for young historical fiction, then it's like, okay, I know what I want to do and I kind of want to say, but I actually map it out. So, but I love that you go to different places, and I would think that you have to research like where you could go to get sort of that eerie feeling. So like if you were in New York, for example, and I wanted to and get an eerie feeling, then I would make sure I had my husband with me. If I was going to walk around the big park.
A bodyguard,
yeah, right. And then I would be taking in those sounds. So I'm sure there's places like that in Europe that you go to get that feeling.
Yeah, I mean, actually, the book that I've just written it's just been finished, the sort of the submission draft, if you like. It's actually about fairy culture in Western France, like quite near the coast. And there's actually a place where they have one of the oldest Neolithic tunnels ever. It's like a full tunnel of stones that have been there for sort of 5,000-6,000 years. And the locals actually built it as a way to help the fairies to come out of the fairy kingdom and into our world. And of course, we think about fairies these days, like Tinkerbell from Peter Pan, all very smiley and shiny. But in those days, the fairies of the folklore are not quite so friendly and more likely to bite you and take you back to their world forever. So yeah, that was a really eye-opening experience, and I very much felt the atmosphere when I was there in this big forest looking at this fairy tunnel. It was really fascinating.
And did they let you walk in that tunnel?
I mean, you could do, but it's very low because the fairies are kind of small. So I sort of crouched down and took some photos inside. But I mean, to get through, I would have had to like wriggle along my belly, and it was been raining. It wasn't very pleasant. So I'm prepared to make some effort for my art, but not that much.
I understand. Yes, I saw on your website that and so the book that you're referring to, and I do want you to talk about your books because that's the most important thing, is you had a picture of a fairy. Absolutely. And is that the one you're referring to?
Yeah, very much so. Yes, it's like it's a fairy. Like some people attribute it to the fairy character Ondine, which is like a famous sort of figure in French and Germanic ancient cultures, but like no one really knows. But this fairy that they had there, it's a really interesting character because they believe that she has power over the ocean, and that basically when there are big storms, it's because she's there controlling the winds and then harvesting the souls of the dead in the water. So it's pretty dark stuff for fairy tales.
Wow, and she just looks so sweet and innocent.
Yeah, she's like riding around with her little pet lobsters, and you think, yeah, she's lovely, but no, not lovely.
No,
not
lovely
at all.
So tell everyone again the name of your book, and when do you think it might be coming out?
Well, yeah, it's going to go through.
Are you allowed to tell the book?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about it, but it's actually the process of titling it is one of the things I hate the most about writing, because I could write the book, but in terms of thinking of the title, it's a real struggle for me. So it's kind of up in the air. Like the working title is Ondine, the name of the fairy, but I'm hoping that I will find some inspiration to think of a different title. And I believe it's going to come out towards the end of this year or the beginning of next year. So that's the general suggestion. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank
and
you
I
so much.
understand what you mean about a title. It's so important because I don't know if you agree with me, but I'd like to get your thoughts. Is that title, is it catching the reader? And B, does the cover just make you want to open it up and never put it down, right?
That's the thing. Yeah, absolutely. I think those things are so important. Like titles, like you say, it's got to be a catch-all. It's got to be something that kind of speaks to the reader about the book, but also makes them want to pick it up. And yeah, covers, I mean, I've actually been really lucky with covers. I mean, like this was the book that I had most recently, which is called Below. And this cover is just glorious. It's the ebook version, but yeah, it's so beautifully crafted. And I also have this one here, which again was a really lovely cover. So I have no.
I love how you say your horror covers are really lovely.
Yeah. Maybe lovely is the wrong adjective here, actually, but...
No, they're really great. They're spooky.
Yeah, that's what we're going for.
Yeah, lovely spooky, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly, right. And do you use the same person for your covers?
I have used the same one a couple of times. So this one here, The Balance, was actually done by the same guy called Greg Chapman, who's an Australian gentleman. And he also did my short story collection, which is called Paths Best Left Untrodden, also very lovely. This one was done by a guy called Keelan Patrick Burke, who is a bit of a legend in the horror artwork world. So when he agreed to do the cover for that book, I was delighted. And when he presented me with Below's cover, I kind of almost fainted, really. So yeah. Wonderful.
And as people get to know you, I'm sure you have 1 million followers, but let's say we have some newbies listening for the first time. If you were to recommend one of your books to start out on, is there one, or do you just love them all?
I mean, yeah, I think they all have something to say, hopefully. This is the one that's kind of done the best. Like, it's actually been the best received, The Balance. It was my first novella. But this one, because it's a short story collection, it's kind of a bit more diverse. So you get kind of a flavor for all of the different things that I do. So there's a bit of dark sci-fi in there. There's a bit of folkloric horror. There's some occult stuff. So there's lots of variety in there. So it kind of gives people some different tastes of what they might expect from my work, if you like.
Yes, I really love that. And especially those kind of books are great to take on an airplane and everything, because even if you're like, I really want to get one more chapter in of this short story, you're like, oh my gosh, I can do it on this flight. It's
exactly.
That's kind of fun. And what is The Balance all about?
Well, that one was actually, before I lived in Portugal, I lived in Poland for 3 years. And so I spent a lot of time learning from people there about the culture, about the folklore and this kind of thing. And there's a very famous folklore person who kind of exists throughout all of Slavic culture. So, like Polish, Russian, Ukrainian, lots of that area of the world. It's a lady called Baba Yaga, who is a sort of a natural witch, I suppose you'd call them. So someone who kind of like interacts with nature on a kind of magic level. And so this is like a retelling of that sort of folklore tale, but with kind of an ecological theme to it as well. So like the balance itself is basically the balance between humanity and nature, which the Baba Yaga character is trying to protect, I suppose. So yeah, that's the way it works, really.
I could see that being very, very popular with audiences, because people are trying to find a balance. I love the title, by the way, and to appreciate the world we have today and how we can save it. So that's really cool. And the fact you lived in Poland is awesome as well. It's a very interesting country, right? Yeah, so many beautiful places. Absolutely. So my question to go back to is, did you always love dark? I mean, I'm sure your mama read you happy things when you were little. Like, when did you transfer to loving horror?
I mean, I think like many horror writers, this is a tale of slightly irresponsible parenting. So like when I was a child, I started reading quite early, and I read a lot of normal kid stuff, as you say, like stories that my mum or dad would read me were perfectly normal kids stories. But then when I started coming back from school, sort of around age 8 or 9, I started to get a little bit bored of my school library books and decided to start stealing or borrowing from my dad's library. And his library was, Stephen King, James Herbert, Clive Barker, that kind of thing. And so I started reading very scary stuff, very inappropriate stuff, frankly, for my age. And I think a lot of it went over my head. But it was still an awakening for me. And I really started to get this, this thing of like being afraid or being unsettled, and like the feeling that gave me. And then I actually then ended up telling my first sort of invented story at a school camp trip with my classmates, where they did like a talent show thing, and some people were singing and some people were dancing, doing magic, and I told a story. But I told a horror story about ghosts trapped in these coins that my classmates and I had bought at like the museum that day. And then no one went to sleep. Everyone was just in their tents crying at night. And the teachers hated me, but I loved the feeling. So
you are a natural storyteller.
I mean, I like to think so. Yeah.
Yeah. That when you're on stage for that first time as a young kid and you see people reacted so well to what you did, it's like you get this bug,
Absolutely. It's like that buzz of adrenaline, and you're just like, yes, I want more of this, please. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. It's very hard to let go of that, I must say. So now, is there a favorite character you have from your different books?
Well, actually, the most recent novella I wrote, Below, which is this one, it's a subterranean horror book. And when I wrote it, basically, there are two really central characters. One is a guy called Nick, who is an academic, a mining engineering expert, and he is kind of very cerebral. He's quite afraid of the situation of being down in the mine. This place, it takes place in a recently unearthed collapsed mine, and his kind of foil in that book is a lady called Jess. And when I wrote the book, I was very conscious about making the kind of action character the woman character, because before I started writing fiction, I was doing travel blogging for a number of years, and I met so many women in that culture, in that sort of subculture, that subgroup, who did adventure travel. Like things like free climbing up temples in forests and stuff like this. It just blew my mind how these women were so incredibly brave. So when I wrote this book, I very much had those people in mind, and so this character Jess just kicks butt throughout the entire book. She's just amazing. I'm very fond of her.
Oh, good. You've already announced several of your books that would be just fabulous TV or movies, right? I can already see season 1, season 2.
Yeah, if Netflix are watching, they can call me anytime.
Anytime. That's right. You heard it live right here, Netflix. Exactly, give him a call. Exactly. Kev Harrison. Is there, so when you told your parents, like, was this a moment with your family? I'm sure you're an adult by now, where you went, I'm not going to just be a traditional educator. I'm going to be a writer. And they were like, yeah, have fun with that.
I think my family were always prepared for me to do slightly off the wall things, because like in my teens and 20s, I was a screamer in a death metal band, or 2 death metal bands, actually. So I was always doing concerts and stuff. And I think my mum thought I was crazy, probably continues to think I'm crazy to some extent. My dad actually was very supportive, both of the music. When I was young, he used to, before me and my band could drive, he used to drive us around with our equipment to concerts and things, just for the price of a case of beer now and then. And then when I started writing books, he was actually working as a healthcare worker at the time. And he was really devious, because he would actually give my books to people who were inpatients in the hospital. So they were a captive audience. They had no escape. They had to read them. So it's a very smart tactic. I appreciated it.
And a proud dad, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we are going to take a tiny break.
Sure.
And when you come back, I would love you, if you feel like it, to read from one of your books.
Sure, yeah, I'll read a little bit from Below. Absolutely.
Okay, absolutely. Great. Well, commercial break time.
Sure.
USA Global TV and Radio presents international award-winning author, speaker, educator, DIANN BOEHM.
I want to thank everybody for joining us today on this special edition of the Corner Bookstore, USA Global TV. And we're talking with the co-host of the Corner Bookstore, DIANN BOEHM today, who is herself an author of many books, not just children's books, but also books for adults. DIANN, welcome to the Corner Bookstore.
Everyone should have their own library. Even children should start developing their library and know that what happens in a garden, it grows. And I want their library to grow. And never ever get rid of a book, because what you might have enjoyed as a child reading and having lovely memories of your parents reading as you get older, you'll grow to cherish those books in another way. My specialty is to help people realize that we are all storytellers, and that if you have this yearning to get this story out, but you don't know how to get started, I want to be the person that you can come to, you can feel comfortable with. I'll learn your personality. We'll just go and have itty bitty baby steps, just like in my book, A Time to Fly. Before you know it, the young new author is ready to fly to and go to super professional coaches.
DIANN's books are available now at DIANNFLOYDBOEHM.com. Charlie and the Tire Swing, How It Began. A Time to Fly. A Song of Peace. Rise, a Girl's Struggle for More. Harry the Camel. The Little Girl in the Moon. The Little Girl in the Moon, Moxie and Tycho Town. Moon League Adventures, The Serengeti.
And I'm saying, go for it. Okay, welcome back, everybody, to the show. Kev's going to be with us, and he is going to be reading from one of his stories. So if we can bring Kev back out, that would be dandy.
Hello, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to read a little bit from below. This is a novella which came out last year from Brigids Gate Press. And this is the 4th chapter. And this is after some of the story has already been established, but yeah, you'll see how it goes. Nick's eyes flicked open, the frame of the trailer rattling. He could hear the low, persistent rumbling of the earth beneath him, accompanied by the high pitch of crockery shaking in cupboards in the kitchenette. Outside, it was still pitch dark, the only light inside the tiny blue pinprick from notification on his phone. He reached out for it, swiping it to life. 3:37 a.m. He flicked away notifications and turned on the torch, illuminating the confined space. He reached for his clothes and dressed quickly. As he stepped down from the trailer, 2 moths darted towards him, dancing in the beam from his phone. Still, the ground shook. He stared at the visible trembling of the huge trailer before his eyes darted up the hillside to the mine. What if the entrance has collapsed again? He scrambled up the hillside, the beam from his flashlight app flicking one way, then the other. As he reached the top, he shone it over to the entrance and felt relief as the portal stood open, a great mouth of all-consuming darkness. The earthquake ended, and the world was momentarily silent. Rocks shifted under moving soil below. He spun, torchlight scanning the hillside until it found the slender shape of Jess, following in his footsteps. "Is the entrance okay?" she called out, one hand held up, protecting her face from the light. "It's fine. The hydraulics held," Nick shouted back. Jess lowered her body to the ground, using her hands for balance as she made her way up the last few yards, then reached out a hand. Nick pulled her to the top where she stood, regaining her breath. "Didn't you bring a light?" Jess shrugged. "I felt the ground rumbling and panicked. I just bolted up here. My night vision isn't too bad anyway." She walked past Nick and on towards the mine entrance. "Bring the light over, would you?" she said, beckoning. Nick followed, trying not to dazzle her. He shone the beam over the surface of the rock surrounding the entrance. Everything was still. No additional rubble adorned the entryway. The dull steel of the first hydraulic supports reflected the torchlight dimly back at them. "That's a relief," Jess said, stepping backwards. "When I woke up, I thought..." A clanging sound pealed from the entrance, metal against metal, distant, ever fainter echoes following the sound to their ears. Their eyes met. "What the..." Jess's expression twisted into one of fear. "Did that come from inside?" Nick took a step into the mine. It sounded like it. He swept the cone of light in an arc from left to right. Nothing moved. It could have been the debris deeper in the clang, clang, more sounds, similar to the first, but this time the two were distinct, their echoes trailing behind. Like knockers, Nick said under his breath. He felt the presence of Jess close behind him. What did you say? She whispered. Knockers, he said again. Jess grasped his wrist firmly, directing the torchlight onto her face, casting shadows which highlighted her look of fear and annoyance. Care to enlighten me? He tugged back the torchlight. In Wales and some parts of the West Country, miners believe there are mythical creatures, knockers, who cause mischief in the mines. They're detectable, well, by knocking, like what we just heard. Jess's hard expression remained. It's stupid folklore, Jess. From a scientific perspective, it's much more likely to be temperature or pressure differences causing metal, rock, or whatever to expand and contract. Clang, 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 a single noise, followed by three more in quick succession. Jess stared into Nick's eyes. Metal expanding?
Bravo.
Thanks.
I did not know that about knockers. I was starting to get really kind of scared there.
I think that folklore did move to the US actually when people moved over from the UK to do mining especially. But I think it's like way maybe out west, or actually I really don't know. I don't know exactly where, but somewhere in that there's still some myths like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure probably in the Northeast as well, where there's a lot of coal mines and so
Perhaps
forth.
so. Yeah.
Yeah. That's an interesting thought. So your language and the flow of the story is really, really catches you. I enjoyed hearing you read it because,
Thank you very much.
there's something when an author reads their own story, you can just feel the passion coming through because you have felt and lived with those characters, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's in cases where I've managed to listen to audiobooks narrated by the author themselves, it always adds like just an extra 5 or 10% to that experience.
Yeah, I agree. I've read, and I love your take on this, that in different author groups I've been, they're like, you don't read your own books. That's really, really bad. But then I hear different people read my books and I'm like, y'all just aren't catching the magic. So I'm like, hello. And maybe it's because I've been on stage and everything. I don't know. But maybe we're not supposed to be that, whatever with your book. But I did read that all your books on audio now?
Only one is on audio actually, which is The Balance. That's available as an audio book as well. But I have actually written for a number of podcasts as well. So there are some podcasts which do short stories. Like for example, there's one called Tales to Terrify, and I've had 2 stories on their podcast and several stories on a podcast called The Other Stories from a group called Hawk and Cleaver. It's like a sort of creative collective, and they always have a narrator doing the story for you. So I've kind of got used to hearing other people and their interpretation of my tales. So I quite like it now.
Oh, you quite like it now. Okay, well, that's good. And you make a good point that it's important for us authors to kind of take in how people are digesting our work, right?
Yeah. The inflection they might put on something and how that maybe is different. I think, especially when it's a good narrator, I think it's good to kind of put your trust in them and just, see what they're going to make of the material you give them.
Right, exactly. And so I think it's really important for us authors, including I know I need to move into that audio world because it's huge. So was this a big decision for you? Like you already knew who you were going to go to and it was like a no-brainer who to work with?
I was actually very lucky with this. This novella was published by a company called Lycan Valley Press. And one of the big advantages of working with them is that one of the co-owners of the press is actually a professional audiobook narrator, and he's wonderful. He's a guy called Desmond Manning, and he's done a lot of fiction, non-fiction, but it kind of guarantees that when you have a book released with them, then it's always going to have an audio version coming along with it. And I completely agree with what you're saying. It's such a growth market. And I think, especially with the age of podcasts that we're in nowadays, people are so much more used to digesting their media through audio. And so not having an audiobook out there seems like a real missed opportunity, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. And you, as an educator as well, realize that our youngins, they're not just auditory and visual, but and it used to be visual was like huge, but auditory is becoming even bigger.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Because you can do it when you're doing other things. I mean, I spend a bit of time in the car because I live just outside Lisbon, and my work and a lot of other things I do are in the city. So, you know, I probably drive 30 minutes, 40 minutes most days. And so in that time, you know, it can be dead time, or it can be time where I'm learning something or reading a book virtually, you know, through listening. So I totally get the benefit of that experience. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Well, we only have a few minutes left. And so I would like a couple of things. One, to make sure people know where to get your books and so forth. But I would like them to learn a little bit about you. Like, do you have a favorite pet? Or you have to dive into the ocean to clear your mind to get going to things? Is it songs? What makes you tick?
Well, I mean, I'm actually amazed that my two cats did not photobomb this entire conversation. Because normally, as soon as I get onto a camera, they're here with their tail in my face and this kind of thing. So I have two cats who I love dearly. Yes, they're wonderful. And actually, funny enough, you're saying about diving into the ocean. I'm a terrible swimmer, but I do love running. And I actually really recommend running as a way to help with the writing process, which sounds weird. But it's one of those things that I find I get into kind of an almost mindful space, you know, because like everything kind of shuts down and I just end up being like on autopilot. And it really enables my creative process to work its way around problems or to just come up with new ideas. So I find that's something that really, really helps me a lot.
And if Dr. Jacalyn was on the show with us today, she would be like right with you and all that
Really?
running. Oh, absolutely.
Awesome.
She is a powerhouse in so many ways, but when it comes to running, jogging, lifting, she would be right.
She might leave me in the dust, but I would be running a few kilometers behind. But yeah, sure, we could start together at least.
Oh, that's great. I'd be like waving to y'all. Bye. Y'all have a good time. I'm going to go look at the butterflies in the garden and sing a little bit. And,
I mean, that is also a very mindful experience, right? Yeah.
Yes. And then, you know, inspiration's going to come. La, 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 la. I hope you have fun sweating.
That is the least fun part. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I'm just teasing. So, closing out, we're going to spotlight you, and I would love for you to share with everyone the best way to contact you and who should contact you. And I would think it would be everybody. And so go for it.
Thank you so much. So yeah, I'm always keen to hear from readers and to meet new readers as well, of course. So you can get me at my website, which is down here on the screen right there. It's kevharrisonfiction.com. You can also find me at my Instagram handle there, which is Mr. Evil Kev. You can also find me on Twitter. If you just search for Kev Harrison, you'll find me, and my picture looks like my face. There's not many faces like this one, thankfully. And also, if you sign up for my newsletter, you can actually get a free book of supernatural horror as you sign up. And you don't have to stay signed up. If you want, you can sign up and get the book and then unsubscribe. I won't be offended. But yeah, I send like a monthly newsletter every month with a bit of information about what I'm doing, what's new, and new releases and special offers and that kind of thing. So yeah, I'd love to hear from any readers out there who are into dark fiction.
Awesome. And you know, I know we're going to be closing out soon, and that should have been like the end, but I can't help it. You made more things come to mind, if you don't mind.
Okay. Sure.
I just want people to know that what you said about newsletters, to please subscribe to Kev's newsletter. Us authors work really hard on newsletters, and we give you so much valuable information. And so again, go to Kev's website, correct, Kev? And they can sign up right there on your for your newsletter.
Yeah.
And what a kind person you are that you would send out a freebie, but to just say like, okay, you can not take my newsletter anymore. I'm like, I'd feel so guilty and have to go to church like I stole something.
I'm not so judgmental. I'm fine with it.
I just want to say that, you know, yay for you. You're brilliant. And so what are you working on right now? Can you give a tiny bit before we go?
Sure. So I'm working at the moment on a folkloric horror novella. It's actually based on a short story, which is in this book here, Paths Best Left Untrodden, which is my collection, called The Solstice. Okay. And it's set in the north of Portugal in the 17th century. but it's kind of a second world. It's based around a folklore festival, which still happens today, where people wear these masks to sort of scare away dark spirits on the winter solstice. And in my version of the world, instead of adults, it's children that wear the masks, and they have to get masks specially made for them. And if they don't succeed in scaring away the evil spirits will completely consume their villages, kill everyone, and just that ground will be gone and lost forever to the shadows. So it's pretty dark, and I'm having a great time with it so far. So that will hopefully be out sometime in the middle of next year.
That's exciting, and I'm already on pins and needles, and I think I need to eat some chocolate cake to calm myself down.
That's a wise medication.
And I just want to share with you, our producer, Dr. Jacalyn, just said running is amazing. So I think if we get her to Portugal, Utah, you two guys can go be inspired.
There's a lovely
running.
coast path, like right across the street. There's a coast path, just goes along the ocean. It's beautiful. Anytime.
Well, that's great. And I hope sometime that you will come back and share your book launch, maybe for your books.
That'd be amazing.
We would just love to hear from you. You've been an amazing guest, and I feel so honored that I got to be the host and talk to you so much.
I'm really honored to speak to you and to have time on your network. So thank you so much for inviting me on the show, and I would love to come back anytime and talk to you guys.
That sounds great. Well, I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
And you too. Take care.
Take care. Well, thank you, Kev Harrison, for being our guest today. It was fabulous. And for those who are listening, please make sure you sign up for his newsletter and go to kevharrison.com and find out about all of his books. And even if you never were into horror before, because of the way it sounds like he writes his books, it's a great way to get introduced into the world of dark fiction. And how clever of him to taken folklore and really studied it and bring it to us. And, you know, I think with every story, no matter what genre you're in, including dark fiction, that there is always a lesson to learn. So, Kev, if you're still listening, I hope you'll come back and share with us some of the lessons we can learn from reading your stories. Well, that's it for the Corner Bookstore today. Thank you so much for joining us. And let's give a big shout out to Dr. Jacalyn. We miss her so much because it's fun hosting when she's here. I'm always learning from her. So have a blessed day, and we'll see you next time on the Corner Bookstore. Bye for now.